field from a very personal experience. I used to actually work for the U.S. Air Force, and the age of 40, out of the blue, as it happens for most of us. Make sure, not my phone. All right, silence your cell phones. My husband was diagnosed with cancer. We had a 5-year-old, and life takes a turn that you completely never expect and gets thrown. Your whole life gets thrown upside down. And in that journey, which lasted over the next 5 years, he ended up having multiple types of cancer. We found coaching, and it was tremendously. I mean, I say life-saving. When I tell this story, it was life-saving because it helped both of us shift out of feeling like a victim to this disease, which had taken over our lives and our families and our future and everything, and helped us focus on where we did have power in our lives and where we did have control. And that is huge. And so I'm going to share just a little bit of that with you today. I'm going to give you a framework for how to understand the mental and emotional side of the survivorship journey. Okay, so let's talk about what that looks like, right? So survivorship, there is the physical side. There's how your body feels. There's how your body is now, maybe after treatment or after the disease. There's what you can and can't do physically, right? We're all very familiar with that part of the journey. And then there's the mental and emotional side. And I link those two together, and I'll talk more about why I do that. But the mental and emotional side, right? All the emotions you feel on a daily basis, the worries, the fears, the uncertainty, the anxiety every time there's a scan, the trepidation, but also the joy there is in life and the happy moments. And the mental part of that, right? All of our fears, the questions we have in our head, the thoughts that run through our head, how we think about our strength now, how we think about life now, like all of that mental part. And then there's the spiritual journey. And I think of that in terms of your connection to not only just yourself, but the world around you. And maybe you have changed how you view the meaning of life. Like what is it about? Why does this happen? You might have changed how you connect to yourself or how you connect to others. So I'm not going to talk about the spiritual side. I'm not going to talk about the physical side. Those aren't my areas of expertise, but I am going to talk today about the mental and emotional side. And again, I'm going to present a framework to understand how those two interplay and where you can have a lot more control than you may realize. So, we've all had those days, right? Let's talk about, on a daily basis, we have lots of emotions. Or maybe you don't, actually. It's either way, right? We're either kind of sometimes pushing down our emotions a lot of times, or we're experiencing them. Fears, anxieties, as I mentioned, right, one of the most common is like an upcoming scan and all the anxiety that goes with that. Certain triggers in the change of the seasons may trigger you in ways like bring up emotions unexpectedly because you connect them with certain events. So all the emotions we experience throughout the day determine whether we have a good day or a bad day. Right? It's crazy. Like maybe you woke up this morning and you were thinking, oh, I've got the conference today and there's all that great free food, which we know is a fan. We hear it every year. It's one of the reasons why we stay at this location is because the food is so great. Right? And so that thought, thinking about the conference today, thinking about hearing some, interesting presentations and connecting with people, you think you're excited. You're having a good day. But perhaps you had an argument with your spouse and they said something that really made you mad. and you can't stop thinking about it, and you're annoyed, so that can linger with us, and so that you might feel a little distracted or irritated. Or maybe you woke up with some pain, right? And our thoughts about that, what does it mean? Right? So all of those things impact our days on a day in, day out basis. How we experience our life has to do so much with the thoughts in our head and our emotions that we're experiencing. And that's good. We all know that, right? But the problem is a lot of times we don't understand what's happening. And so it can feel very much like it's because my husband was a jerk yesterday morning that I feel so angry with him, right? Or it's because that, it's 85 degrees in Tacoma, and so I hate the heat, right? Here it's 85 degrees, it's like super hot. So we connect how we feel with what happens in our life, what other people say and do. And so therefore, it can often feel like we can feel very powerless in the face of things when they don't go well, when life doesn't go as expected. And that can feel like we're kind of a victim to it. When that happens, right, people usually respond one of a couple different ways. When we're feeling like things are out of control, we will often try to take control where we can. And what that may look like is trying to micromanage things or trying to tell other people what they should and shouldn't be doing, right? It's very easy, like if everybody just did things the way we thought they should do them, life would go so much smoother, right? But we can't control other people, unfortunately, we find out, so that can be very frustrating. A lot of times we try to control our emotions or not feel them altogether, right? We have a lot of things in our society today that allow us to not feel our feelings. I mean, endless. Like, this is number one, right? There's a million ways on your phone alone to not have to face whatever you're feeling. So when things aren't going well, there's a lot of ways to sort of numb our emotions because it doesn't feel good. Also, people can also have a reaction of when things are difficult to shut down as well, withdraw, crawl up on the couch and binge on Netflix. That is kind of one of my go-tos, by the way. I mean, it's endless. Like, there's so much TV, you could name it, right? There's endless TV to watch. So if we want to escape from the world, it's very easy to do that. But the challenge is none of those things, they don't fix the problem. They don't change what happens in our world. They don't fix the argument with your spouse. They don't change the diagnosis. They don't change your, health. They help us try to escape from it. But we still end up feeling crappy. So there is a lot that we can control here. And as I said, I wanted to give you a framework for what that looks like to help you focus in on where you can control. Okay, so this is what, in my coaching education, we learned is we call the model. And I want you to think, first of all, as I mentioned, right, like we get a diagnosis and we're probably flooded either with thoughts or mostly like feelings like fear, anxiety, worry, right? We attribute our feelings to what's happening around us a lot of times. So what is happening in the world is happening around us is the circumstance. In this model, right, it's the circumstance. It's the events in our life. The weather is a circumstance. It's 70 degrees outside. That's a circumstance. Politics, right? Who's president? What's happening in the news? That's a circumstance. Something outside of us. What our sister says is a circumstance. How our children behave. I have a 17-year-old, so this is always on the top of my mind, right? Is a circumstance. And what I mean by that, the circumstances are the things outside of us, and inherently they are neutral. They just are. Okay, now I know cancer is a circumstance. We think, how could that be neutral? How could war be neutral? But it happens. It is, it exists in the world, and none of that can be a problem until, right, and for ourselves individually, the next part of the model is our thought. This is the part that we often skip over in our daily lives because what happens in the world and in our lives is, again, neutral until we have a thought about it, right? Our thoughts are made up of our interpretations, our judgments, our opinions about what our spouse said. You know, has anybody ever had the experience where, like, and I'm gonna use your spouse, but it could be anybody, right, who makes a comment, you know, they maybe say like, oh, I see you're wearing that shirt, and you're like, you take it as an insult, right? You just made an interpretation about what they meant, like the shirt wasn't, it was ugly or something, you know. We interpret things all the time. That's how we make sense of the world. And those interpretations are our thoughts, and they're optional. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, obviously, but I just want you to know right now that it's the thoughts about what happens to a world. That's the second part of the model. Why that matters and why I'm focusing so much on it is because our thoughts are what cause our feelings. It is not what happens to us. It's not what people say or do. It is how we think about that, and how we think about that will impact how we feel. Okay, so in my example, right, I've got here like it's raining. Some people love the rain, and so their thoughts are, yay, it's raining. Like, we need the rain. It's so good for us. You know, I love that it keeps our area green and moist, you know. I'm from California, which one of the reasons I moved is because, you know, it's on fire every summer. So I very much appreciate the rain. I have a whole new appreciation for the rain because when I moved, the summer I moved, I mean, you know, my hometown actually burned to the ground in the campfire of 2019. Some of you may remember that, made national news. There's a lot of towns that have burned down in California since and before, but ours was a very massive disaster. But other people have, you know, may not want the like the rain, right? We have different thoughts about the weather. It's crazy. Two people, same weather, different thoughts about it. And how you think about the weather that day is going to determine how you feel. Okay, so our feelings, whether you're aware of them or not, and that's really key. I know so many people tell me, oh yeah, but I just felt sad. Yeah, because there's something going on in here that's creating what's in here. We are not aware. A lot of times it's in the back of our head, okay? But there is a thought in there, or thoughts, right, that cause how we feel, that bring about that emotion. And that emotion is what fuels our actions in the day. I will tell you, you know, if you are feeling like sad, right, a lot of us think about right now, what do you do when you're sad? It will fuel your actions. For me, if I'm feeling a little sad, like I want to check out. That's when I go to Netflix, and usually chocolate. Okay, those are my go-tos. We all have them, right? I mean, other people handle it different ways. There's some you know, beneficial ways and some not so beneficial ways. But main point I want to get across is that our feelings, when we're feeling good, we do things that are good for us. We take care of ourselves. And when we're feeling bad, we often don't, right? So our feelings fuel our actions. And what we do and don't do in our lives is what creates the results we have directly, right? So this is, like I said, it's a framework for thinking about really the cause and effect and the role that your thoughts play in your life, and specifically, as we're focused in today, on the emotional component. Okay, so your thoughts play a big role in your emotions. Now, I want to tell you, like I said, cancer will forever shape your experience. Your thoughts, we have thoughts on default based on based on our life to that moment, how we were raised, the culture we live in, right? I mean, for Americans, like eating soup for breakfast we don't do that, right? We have bread. but if you're in an Asian country, like soup is not uncommon, soup and or rice, like, so our culture shapes what we think is breakfast food, like how we think about breakfast, which is kind of crazy, so our thoughts, the thoughts that come up for us are going to be shaped by everything you've experienced. And I want to share just a story about this, kind of the power of how your mind is going to be influenced by what's happened to you. And often, the important part is that you can't always rely it to be accurate. In fact, a lot of times, you can't trust your thoughts, which I know seems crazy. But here's my story that I think will illustrate this point. So my husband was diagnosed with osteosarcoma, so it's a cancer in his bone. And how we found that out was because we were both pickleball players. I don't play pickleball so much anymore, but I will get back to it because it is the best sport. And he was having shoulder pain, and so we thought it was like a rotator cuff injury. He was 45. Yeah, he was 45. And so he was going to physical therapy for his shoulder. Well, I had gone away to the East Coast for a business trip for about a week, and his physical therapist said, I think we need to, he need to get this checked out. So he had a scan, and that's how we found out he had cancer. Like, thought it was a rotator cuff injury. Like, so, I mean, just, talk about just sideways. Well, years and years later, okay, that experience is embedded in my brain. Years and years later, he did pass away. About a year after he passed away, I'm a single parent of a now 10-year-old, and my shoulder started to hurt. Like, same pain I remember him experiencing. Same exact pain. And, I mean, it gives me chills thinking about it now. Went to my doctor. My doctor, fortunately, was, he had had a child who had cancer. So he very much understood the emotional, effect that I was having. But I was utterly convinced that I had cancer. Utterly convinced. I mean, you could not tell me it was not true. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. Now I'm a single parent. I'm thinking about my 10-year-old. I'm like, the whole stream, we start the whole cause and effect of oh my gosh, what if? What am I going to do? My kid's going to be parentless. I mean, you just go down this whole, I call this whole train of thought, right? And he said to me, look, I do not believe you have cancer. There's no evidence of that, but I do understand. And if you want to get a scan, I feel like, I understand that you need proof to not believe this. And so he did order one for me. I honestly don't remember, now I look back and I'm thinking, why didn't we do some other tests? Maybe we did. I honestly don't remember. But he ordered the scan for me. I went to go get it, went to the hospital, went to the check-in, and then discovered that my insurance was not going to pay, was going to only pay 25% or something very small. And I was going to have to pay several $100s. And I was not in the position to do that. And so then I'm rethinking, well, how important is this? How bad? I don't know. Maybe, I didn't get the scan because I was not really, I wasn't able to pay that money. And I didn't have it. Who does, right? So, long story short is I did not have cancer, but I was convinced, my brain had convinced me I did. And I did, I was able to let go of that fear. I actually, at this point, I had been through life coach training. I did understand what we're going to talk about today. I understood this model. But I share that story because it just shows you, to someone else, it's just shoulder pain. They don't even give it a second thought, right? But for me, because of that experience with my husband, I was convinced it was cancer. So I say that to say that what our brain offers us a lot of times should be treated with suspicion when it's not useful, right? When it causes fear and anxiety, it's not useful, okay? So that the thoughts that come to us are going to be shaped by all those experiences, but it doesn't mean they're true. Okay, so I want to give you another example of this, a little closer to home. I coach on this as much with caregivers as, I don't coach people with cancer. I coach their partner. But this exact scenario comes up equally. So, the circumstances, there's a scan. You've got a scan coming up. Or you've had the scan and you're going to find out the results. But now, these days, it's like those two things happen closer together. You're going to have thoughts, right? It's very common to have thoughts like, what if the cancer's back? What if it's spread? Something, what if, usually. We start going down this whole scenario of what could happen that we're dreading, usually. When we think like that, of course it creates anxiety. Of course. There's a whole term for it, scan anxiety. And when we're feeling anxious, anxiety, think, all of you right now, think about what do? How does anxiety affect you in your life? For me, when I'm feeling anxious about anything, I can't focus. That's probably the biggest impact it has for me. I can't focus, and I feel just kind of out of sorts and jittery, I guess. You are, often, we're distracted usually when we're feeling anxious. Some people become a little more irritable, short-tempered. You might get in an argument more easily with someone you are close to. And that anxiety will impact your days until that scan, until you kind of get the evidence, right, from the result. And that is going to impact the result, right? You live in that what-if scary realm for those couple days. So that's one scenario. Different scenario, though. Same circumstance. Remember, this is why the circumstance is a neutral till we have a thought about it, right? Same circumstance, thought is, it's just data. We'll figure it out. That's kind of one of my favorites, actually. It's just data, right? And when you think that, it's going to feel different. It's an equally believable thought, I think, for most people, right? Equally believable that it's just data. Doesn't mean the other fears and worries and thoughts won't come to your head, but when you can just continually refocus on a different thought, and I'm just giving an example here, you're going to feel differently. And when we can consciously shift our focus, changes how we feel. That more resilient feeling, you're going to be more apt to take better care of yourself. Maybe even more conscious to take care of yourself, right? To get a good night's sleep, to eat well, to take some walks leading up to the scan. Maybe to reach out to a friend, connect, right? We do things that are better for us generally when we're feeling resilient, when we're feeling calm. And you become more resilient. Those actions are what create our results. So now I want to add another element into this and to explain kind of why this works, why our brain works the way it does, because it just helps to understand. When you understand what's happening, you can bring more awareness to it. So we are constantly taking in all this information. Look around in the room right now. There's probably at least 100 people in here, I think, around there. People, we can be in a noisy room where our brain is taking in information all the time as we go throughout our days. And there's no way we can process all that information. So our brain has what's called the reticular activating system, RAS. You don't have to remember that. But it acts as a filter. It tells our brain what's important and what's not, so that we can sort through all the stuff in our lives and just focus on what's important. And so what you focus on becomes more of what you see. Now, an example of that is you can be in a noisy room with a bunch of people and somebody says your name, you will hear it, or you will be alert to it. Your brain is like, oh, that's my name. That's important, right? Another example that often comes up when people talk about the RAS is if you've ever bought a car. And you could, so about 5 years ago, I decided, I had a Nissan. I decided I was going to get a Nissan Rogue. That might have been a mistake, but whatever. I still have the car. It still works. Once I made that decision of what kind, make, and model, I saw them everywhere. There are a lot of Nissan Rogues out there, by the way. But you see them everywhere once you decide, because I told my brain, oh, this is important. I have a friend with a Mini Cooper. It's a red one. I've always loved those cars. Someday maybe I'll have one. They're everywhere up here also. I also see them a lot, along with the Teslas and the Subarus, of course. But, you start seeing in the world what you've told your brain is important. Okay, so that's how the RAS works. It will work, it's going to work regardless. So that means that when we're looking for the negative, we're going to see that as well. When we're looking for the bad news, when we're looking for how the world sucks, right? Or how politics suck, or that's so easy to find evidence for that. So easy. All of us right now could think of things. So it works either way. The important thing to know is that it's working. That means that when you know it's working, you can bring some awareness to that and then decide what you want to focus on. Okay, so the two things together, to bring those two things together, right? Your thoughts are what shape your feelings, not what's happening out there in the world. It's what you think about what's happening out there in the world. And you have the ability to consciously direct your focus when you have awareness of it. Okay, so remember, what you think about what's happening, that's where we have control. When we have awareness. I will tell you, so one of the, for me, this was, okay, so my husband and I, we were a little bit of a non-traditional couple. I was the working parent. As I mentioned, I worked at the Air Force, and he was a stay-at-home parent. And I had been in my career for a long time at that point, and I had been feeling burnout. And when he got cancer, my job provided our health insurance and the stability and our income and everything. And so when he got cancer, and I'll back up to say that I had been really wanting to take a position overseas, which I had the ability to do which would have been amazing. But when he got cancer, all of that, we put all that aside. So I had been feeling very stuck in my job and sort of blaming cancer on it, right? Now we can't do anything. We need my job. We need the stability. And I was just, Sundays would come around and I'd dread work. When I learned the model and I learned that it's my thoughts about my job that are causing me to feel stuck. It's not my job. I started modeling out my thoughts. What am I thinking? Well, of course, I was thinking things like, I feel stuck. I don't want to do this job anymore. I'm burned out. Those were my thoughts on repeat. When I modeled that and saw that, no wonder when I keep telling myself that every day, of course I'm going to feel burnout and stuck, because that's what I'm repeating to myself. Okay, what I did and what I'm going to talk about next is I started asking myself questions. What else can I think instead? What else is true about my job? Turns out I had a great job. I really gave us a very good paycheck. I was paid well. I had great supportive people. I'm forever thankful for my boss at the time. Was amazing. So I worked with great people. It was challenging. I was never bored. And the feelings of burnout and wanting to change were valid. Obviously, because I became a life coach afterward. But at the time, it didn't serve me. I had decided we were going to stay put. I was going to stay put in my job. It didn't make sense for me to make a career change at that time. So it didn't mean that those feelings were invalid. It's just that was where my 100% of my focus was on these negative thoughts about my job. Once I pulled back and asked what else is true, shifted my thoughts. I ended up getting a promotion in that job and stayed in it for 4 more years. So the power of shifting. We're directing your focus. Okay, so as I wrap this up, right, in the last couple minutes here, what I want to do is I want to give you a couple practices to bring this into your life, to make the model kind of this framework, and what do we do with that? Like, how do we apply it to our days to make a difference? The first step is awareness. You have to know what is going on in here. Most of us don't pay attention. Or if we do, we're sucked into it, right? We get caught in believing our thoughts and getting swept up in them, believing the fear, the what-if scenarios, the negative train as it, heads out the station. We get swept up in our thoughts. We don't see them as, oh, these are optional, and these are just based on all the things that have happened. Doesn't mean they're invalid or not, but they're not the 100% truth. They're my interpretations of what's happening. That's the awareness part. Just seeing that your thoughts are not absolute, right? They're optional, and you have a lot more authority. Doesn't mean the default thoughts are going to come up. They will. 100% they will. Like, you can't, and there's no point to try to, like, a lot of times, there is, you can be like, they call it toxic positivity, right? Where you kind of just squash down the negative side of life. This isn't about squashing that down. That stuff is still there. You want to see it, though. You just want to see it. There is power in awareness, huge power. Because for me, in like my story of my job, like, I just needed to pull back and remind myself of the other aspects of my job, which were equally true. I wasn't making those parts up either. I had blinders on, and I had gotten myself stuck in this kind of negative, negative chatter about my job. So I needed to widen the scope and look at what else is true. And once I started intentionally focusing on the other things, and some days I had to do it really consciously because it wasn't a habit for me. We get habitually believing our negative thoughts. It can become a habit. So that's why awareness is really the first thing. You want to see, what are you thinking on a regular basis? What is your self-talk? It's a great one for people. Do you have negative self-talk? Do you judge yourself harshly? Are you judgmental of others? Okay, in coaching we always say there's no shame. It's just awareness. This is all about just getting to know ourselves better. Because the more we know ourselves and bring awareness to it, then we can decide what we want to keep and what we want to change. That's what I love about coaching. It's about like, there's no right or wrong here. It's just what empowers you, what's going to serve you in your life to make your life better. And as I said, just awareness. So one of the ways that you can do this, the simplest, easiest way, I usually have all my clients do this, is called the thought download. It's exactly what it sounds like. You just dump your thoughts in a journal. So writing is important here. You want to take them out of your head and put them on paper. And that allows you to see them for what they are, their thoughts, right? And then you can see, oh, there's a lot of negative stuff in here. And sometimes we just need to clear the air. I mean, venting serves a purpose, but it doesn't serve a purpose when we stay stuck there, right? So clearing out our thoughts and seeing them as optional, right? Because often there's a circumstance, and then there's our thoughts about it. Okay, so that's the first kind of practice tip for practice that you can do today, starting today. What are your thoughts as you go through today? Notice what you think. And you can notice that especially around when emotions come up. Strong emotions is a great time to call attention to your thoughts. Like, what's going on in there? Sometimes you won't know, so I want you to really try to look for it. What am I thinking? Okay, and then the second part of this is it's a brain hack, really. We use it all the time, but questions are an easy way to shift your focus. Because our brain is wired to answer questions, and it will answer whatever question you give it. So if you're giving it negative questions all the time, like, why can't I catch a break? Your brain's going to say, because you're unlucky. Bad things happen to you. Why, like when we ask negative questions, we're going to get negative answers. But the opposite is true as well. If you ask good questions, you'll get good answers. What else is true here? That is one of my favorites. I love that because you can use it in all sorts of scenarios, right? What else could be true? And it just forces your brain to look for other evidence, right? The husband makes a comment about your shirt and you're thinking he's criticizing you. What else could be true? Maybe he bought you that shirt. I don't know. I guess he wouldn't be criticizing you if you bought it. But there's multiple interpretations we can give any one thing. And sometimes when our brain latches onto one, and if that interpretation causes you to feel, right, it's all about how you feel, angry, frustrated, annoyed, then I suggest look for another interpretation because we know those feelings are going to impact your behavior. So that's what this is all about. It's not about sugarcoating the thoughts. It's about consciously shifting to where we are more empowered in our life, where we feel better on a regular basis. And that is questions are just a great tool to do that. There's other ways as well. Another great question. What is good about this? That's a good one and one that will really force you to think. What can I be grateful for? Or what can I appreciate about my life right now? Everybody knows gratitude. Like I could have done a whole thing about gratitude up here, but most of us are very aware of that. But getting there, what I want to impart today is just using questions. Just grab one of these. And these are just some suggestions. Another good question I like is how do I want to be? That's a great one for relationships. If you're in a disagreement with someone you care about, regardless of how they're showing up, how do you want to be? That's a great one for survivorship too. Who do I want to be in survivorship? Who do I want to be? Right? You may not always get there, but by focusing on what you want and defining that, focusing your brain on that, you're going to be moving in that direction. Okay, so why this matters. When you understand the model, when you learn it, you can't unlearn it. That's what I love about it. Once you know, this was literally, I remember the day my husband and I learned about this on a podcast. Anyway, you can't unlearn it. It is happening for all of us in this room all the time. It's just a way, again, it's a framework for how our thoughts impact our life, right? The cause and effect of our thoughts and how that's always in motion as we go through our days for everybody. So when someone else gets angry or upset, it's because of what they're thinking. It's because of interpretations they're making in their life. So you will start understanding why you're triggered by certain things, why something might set you off. That's a great one. Again, in relationships, this often comes up, right? We sometimes, have emotions that come up around our partner or a close friend or somebody that maybe gets on our nerves. Figure out what you're thinking around that. So it can give you insight into why you feel the way you do because it's around your thoughts. And that will bring, awareness. And then it gives you a tool for how to shift when you're heading down the negative train. Okay, so just to sum it up, right? Your thoughts shape how you feel. And you can shift your focus to what empowers you, right? It's not about ignoring. It's just about seeing a wider view. What else can be true? And focusing there on what's more empowering. Awareness and questions are the tools to do that, okay? We all have way more control in our lives than we think. We really, really do. I remind myself of this all the time. We are in control of how we experience our life, but this is how it happens. This is what's happening behind the scenes. This is how you take control when you're feeling out of control. Okay, so we've got about 5 or so minutes for questions. If you've got questions, we've got a couple people. Feel free to raise your hand. I will repeat the questions, but we've also got some mics up here. So for streaming purposes, we want to make sure that we're able to hear the questions. So, anybody got any questions or anything they would just want me to explain a little bit more? Okay, we got a question back there. You just got to hold the, yep, okay.
One of them's on. Testing. They're both on.
Is that one on?
Okay. All right, we got 3 microphones.
Could you put the last slide? Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I've wowed you, I've stunned you into silence, right? That's what I'm gonna interpret about that, right? Okay.
I have a question. So going back to that, is this work? There we go. Going back to that RAS thing, the reticulating activating system. Yep. So as a caregiver, is there something that we can do to try to support somebody that's in like a negative thought spiral of some kind?
Ooh, that's a great question. That's such a great question. Okay. Here is what I often... This is probably the biggest challenge for caregivers, right, is you see your person you love struggling. And it's not always just caregiver. It happen either side. I mean, sometimes the person with, like in what I coached, a lot of times the person with cancer is amazingly resilient, and it's their spouse who's freaking out or struggling. Like, it happens on both ways. So here's what I will say with that. A lot of times, we can't. Because when we try to change the other person's perspective, it does not usually land well. So you cannot, this is a job that you have to do on the inside. You can't make someone else change how they think. I mean, this is the hardest thing, I think, just with people we love when they're struggling. And if you want to you can have influence, but you can't have control, right? Other people are in that realm of things we don't control. And that includes their attitude, which is really what we're talking about here, kind of, right? Their attitude. And if they're stuck in a negative spiral, the best thing you can do, in coaching, we call it holding space, which is just listening and hearing them, letting them vent. They need to usually work things out on their own. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. But the takeaway here is you can't force someone to think differently. And often when you try, like, oh yeah, you try to bring up all these different perspectives, it does not usually land well. So a lot of times we just need to vent or be in the struggle first and need to be heard. And I think with our loved ones, we want to be heard. I think that's the biggest challenge that caregivers have is they want to fix, right? Like, I'll tell you a quick story. With my husband, cancer really impacted, he just became more and more angry as the cancer kind of took over his body, and totally understandable. It was very frustrating for him. I wanted to fix his anger. It was very upsetting for me when he was angry. I tried to fix it for him. I tried to not let things upset him. Did not work well. It did not. Really just irritated him more. Now, people have all different kinds of responses there. But what I learned was I could support him, or in some cases I just needed to leave the room and let him, have an emotional outburst. But we can't fix other people's emotions or even mindset. It's not in our control. Okay, that's an inside job for all of us. And the more we just focus on ourselves, and it's not surprising, but the more we focus on where we have control, which is here, right, the more it actually impacts other people. So to answer your question, I think I came full circle, but basically you can't. And you don't need to. Focus where you do have control, which is your own thoughts and feelings about it, right? Letting it be okay. Believing that they will get through it. That's another thing I saw. Believe in their strength. Okay, you all are amazing, resilient people. We all are, and we want to believe in that. Okay, a couple questions.
All right, we have time for one more question, so.
You mentioned before that venting is nice, but that you could get into just supporting a negative, self-feeding
Yes.
cycle that's not productive to anybody. So I want you to address that. At what point do you say, okay, enough of venting? You said, I leave the room, let him do whatever he wants, or something like that. At what point venting stops being positive, productive, useful?
Yeah, so the question is about venting, right? And are you speaking for like when someone else is venting? Okay, that's a challenging one as well, right? The question is basically, when do you stop someone else from venting? It can be useful, but at what point does it become unproductive? This is a hard one as well. I think a lot of times we vent because we want to be heard. And when we don't feel heard, when people rush to fix it, like, oh, look on the bright side, or we try to like kind of smooth things over or bring about positive thoughts or try to change their perspective, when we try to do that from the outside, when someone else tries to do that, the person will not feel heard. I mean, one of the things therapists do is they listen. That's what coaches do as well. We listen without judgment. And it is one of the most powerful things you can do for anyone in your life. Friends, relatives, your spouse, your partner, even when they're stuck in a negative cycle of venting. So the answer is you have to let them find their own path, right? Like it could go on and on. You may not be able to pull them out of it. But I guarantee you, the more you listen without judgment and just go, gosh, that must be hard. People, when we feel heard, it is often, it's a first step, right? Again, I mean, this is the hard thing. We have to let people have their own emotional journey. And you can suggest, you can be here, you can say, hey, when you're ready to stop venting, and I hear that you need to vent, and I think that's important, but if you're ready, like, I'm happy to brainstorm some solutions. Maybe that's not the most kind of speak to say, but my point I want to bring out, I think, is letting people be heard.
All right, round of applause for Marika Humphreys. Thank you so much for your time here. So, guys, we're going to take about a 12-minute break. So, reminder, bathrooms are down the hall at the registration table. Hang a right. You can't miss them. Listen for the bell ringers. They're going to ring the bells about 5 minutes before it's time for us to come back because we're all going to pretend we're in high school again. And so, yeah, we'll see you here right at the top of the hour at 11 o'clock.
Or spa, salon, and medical professionals with the expertise to address and alleviate the often devastating side effects of cancer treatments. A cancer survivor herself, Becky brings unmatched warmth and compassion to her work, inspiring and supporting others in the pioneering field of oncology skincare. Could we go ahead and give a round of applause to our next speaker, Becky Keene.
Thank you. So I am super excited to be here. I have done this conference for probably 5 or 6 years, or maybe even, no, about 10. It's been 10. Can't hear me? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Point it right at your mouth if we can, right?
And I am a soft talker, at least that's what my husband says, even though I prefer to think it's selective hearing when it comes to him. But I will try to talk louder. So thank you for being here. Would you raise your hand if you've ever heard a talk about skin during cancer treatment? Anybody? A couple. So a couple of you have. So that always surprises me because when you're going through cancer treatment, there's a lot of skin side effects, a lot of things that happen to you all. I know because I was there, and it's actually why I do what I do. So just a little bit about me, cancer survivor. I had cancer in 1978, and I'll tell you that was a long time ago. 47 years now, and it is what really formed my future, gave me a mission, because I remember being only 18 years old at the time and wondering, why isn't anybody talking to me about what's happening here? And how come nobody told me I was going to lose my hair? Doctor probably did tell me, but I didn't really listen, right? So all of those things came into play for me about what's needed. Is there a gap in the cancer care in regards to this? So I'm going to skip through all the rest of that, but I've done a lot of things with this in my life, and I wouldn't change anything. I absolutely love, love, love what I do. My mission is to ensure that no one faces cancer alone. I'm here to encourage that circle of care to include skin care into cancer care, okay? And we've got somebody in the back of the room there that believed in me many years ago and gave me an opportunity, Jamie. And we started the cancer centers at both St. Francis and St. Anthony's with skin and wigs. And they're still going strong today, and I'm so happy about that. But there's many places, you guys, in all across the U.S., very small towns where people have no support at all. You guys are blessed to be here and have such a great support group. So we're going to talk today about skin facts, right? What happens to your skin during treatment? Are ingredients important, and what do we need to know about that? And then skincare during and after treatment. So what does your skin do for you, and why caring for it matters? So there are 7 or 8, depends on who you talk to, functions of our skin. First of all, guys, it's the largest organ of our body. And when you think about vital organs, you probably don't think about your skin, right? And I always say that all of these wonderful things that our skin does for us, we do not think about it until it misbehaves. And when I was at the cancer center, it was the men patients that taught me that one, because they would stick their head into my treatment room and go, "Can you tell me what's going on with this? This has never happened before. I don't know what to do," right? Raise your hand if in your lifetime somebody sat you down and along with talking about the facts of life, did they talk to you about your skin? Anybody? Some people, their mom did. Some people, maybe their grandma did. But for the most of us, nobody talks to us about our skin, and it's so very important. One of the things that we learned when we came through COVID was that how important the skin barrier is. So if our skin barrier is healthy, guess what? We have better health. The two are connected. And so it's very vital that you take care of your skin. So it weighs about 1/7 of our body weight. I love that it communicates with the immune system. There's a cell in our skin called the Langerhans cells, and those cells are swimming around in the skin, paying attention to what's happening, and if there's a problem, it directly messages the brain and the immune system. So we need to keep it healthy. Also, we found out that our skin, it can absorb up to 100% of whatever you put on topically. And, I remember when I started this 15 years ago and I came up with my ingredients to avoid card, and people would go, what difference does it make? Why does it matter? Pretty much all of you have heard it matters, doesn't it? We're finding out that things that are in our personal care products, if they're not good, it can cause a problem in your health. So we need to pay attention to it. Did I go backwards? I think I did good. I'm not very techie. I say I'm touchy, not techie. So we're going to take a look at what happens to our skin specifically with chemotherapy, immunotherapy, radiation, and good old stress, okay? So our skin is really smart, and those 8 layers of our skin are in charge of taking care of everything on the inside. One of the most vital things that it does is protect our organs and hold our bones up, right? All of those good things. And when it's healthy, things will bounce off of it, right? So your bacteria, your viruses, and toxins will not be able to penetrate the skin and get in and cause some harm. But when our barrier is compromised, that's when things can get in, and that's when we start having problems. So chemotherapy, we know, if you've ever had it, it's going to target all your rapidly growing or fast dividing cells. So that is cancer, but it's also hair, skin, and nails. And that's why those things are affected when we go through cancer treatment. So some of the most common side effects are going to be dry skin. Anybody have dry skin when they were going through chemo? Yep. How about some red sensitive skin? It kind of acted up. You got a little red cheeks and a red nose maybe. Pigment changes can happen, so the darker your skin is, or the higher the Fitzpatrick level that's called, then the more we're going to see some of the melanin acting up, because melanocytes are also affected by chemotherapy. So pigment changes, we could have itching or burning, and most people suffer some hair loss and some nail changes, but that depends on the treatment that you're on. Immunotherapy, again, is designed to strengthen your immune system, but in some cases, it can mistakenly attack your healthy tissues. And so you'll get something called, the medical term is acneiform rash. So it looks like that. It looks like acne, and you think, oh my gosh, I'm going back to puberty, and right in the middle of chemo, not a good thing. I've had patients say, it's not fair that you have chemo and acne at the same time. But it's part of it, and it can be. So it'll be a rash, it could be itchy, it could be very uncomfortable, you might have blisters, it'll crack. So it might look like acne, but it's not acne, and we don't treat it the same. Radiation therapy is another one that's going to destroy the cancer cells, but if you have the external beam radiation, it's passing through your skin to get to the tumor or to the cancer. And so it will also damage and impact healthy skin. So we can see anything from a grade 1 to a grade 4 in what's called radiation dermatitis. And again, it might look and feel like a sunburn. Did anybody in this room have to go through that? Yeah, and so I can imagine you had quite the experience with your red hair and light skin. Yeah, it's not a fun one, but it's part of the process, right? So itchy, burning, painful, flaky. It could be what we call wet desquamation, so it might weep. It's not a happy skin condition, but there are things that you can do as you're going through this to prevent it from getting to a grade 4, keeping it more at a grade 1, and never having to deal with some of those things. And that's why it's important to reach out to somebody that can help you prior to going through so you can avoid some of these. So let's look at ingredients. You guys, I gave you all a card. This is ingredients to avoid in your personal care products. So the difference, a good ingredient in your personal care product can actually strengthen and nurture and protect. It can calm and soothe, and it can encourage healing. But if you put harmful ingredients on, you might be further breaking down your skin barrier. You can cause more interruption. It's going to disrupt your barrier functions. Hormone functions can be disrupted because of some of the ingredients. It can cause more burning or itching and then slow down that healing process. And when we're going through something with our skin, we want it to heal quickly, right? Fast, hopefully inexpensively, and we just need to know what we need to do. So I already told you up to 100%. There are certain areas on our body that have a different percentage rate. Now this is going to depend on the person, the health of your skin, and also the ingredients that are in that product. Because once I started doing the research, I found that there were ingredients that are carriers, and they will take whatever else is in that ingredient and pull it in along with it. So we want to avoid some of those, but our forearm absorbs about 1%. And you know, I a lot of times see people put it on their forearm to test a product. It's not going to give you the same as putting it on your face, which can absorb up to 13% of whatever you put on your skin. The underarms are 64%, and our genital area absorbs 100%. I don't know if any of you remember the Johnson & Johnson lawsuit a few years back in regards to talc, because, you know, I grew up with a grandma and a mama that used the Avon body powder, right? Put that all over in all the critical spots, and a lot of women did at that time period, and that caused some cancer in a lot of women in the genital area, putting the talc in there. I just saw an article yesterday saying that the FDA is now considering removing talc from our personal care products, so be aware of that. So we want to avoid fragrance, and the reason we want to avoid fragrance, if it says fragrance on the back of an ingredient deck of a product you're using, currently the FDA does not have to tell us what that is, and it's one of 3,000 products, of which 900 are known toxins or carcinogens, but they don't have to tell us which one they picked. So in my opinion, I say let's just avoid it altogether, right? Better to be safe than sorry. And so another thing, you know, when I would pass a product around a room, probably the first thing you would do is smell it, right? It's what we do. We like things to smell good, but I'll tell you, at the risk of harming yourself, it's okay if it doesn't smell, okay? So get used to a product that might not have a pretty smell in it. And a lot of times, guys, those are put in a product to cover up a nasty smell that's in there from another ingredient that they put in there. So it really doesn't have to be in a product if they use the right ingredients. So the rest of these are on your list, and I'm going to let you guys peruse that at your own time, but it will tell you what the top concerns of each of those ingredients are, and also other names that they could be named on an ingredient deck, because some companies get a little sneaky, a little tricky, and if they know that a phthalate, because that one came out probably 7 or 10 years ago, those would be in shampoos and sudsing and things like that, they just switched the name a little bit, or switched the molecule a little bit, so they could still have their sudser that probably isn't safe, but you're not going to recognize it. So we have to be smarter than them, okay? And I used to give this out, still do, to clients and tell them, go home, look at the products that you're using and see if any of these are in there, and then you can determine whether you want to continue using it or not. One time I went to Walmart, like a little detective. I put a baseball cap on because I knew that they had cameras right in the beauty aisle. I put a baseball cap and my sunglasses on, and I sat on the floor and I moved through a huge row of products. You guys have been to these stores, right? The drug stores and the Walmarts, and there's so many products. How do you pick? How do you choose, right? And so one at a time, I looked at these products to see if I could find anything there that I could recommend to my clients if they wanted to shop there. And I'll tell you, I couldn't find one. And this was probably 8 years ago. Now that might have changed because I haven't been back in 8 years. They're probably waiting for me. They saw me on the camera. I did have a few people come up and ask, what are you doing? And my favorite was this little lady. She was like 82 years old, and she came up to me and she said, what are you doing? So I told her. And she goes, oh, okay, well, will you look at mine? And I'm not going to name the name, but it's one everybody knows. She handed me this big jar. I looked at it, and I told her, well, there's some hormone disruptors in there. There's some links to cancer in there. And I went through the whole list of things, and I thought she'd put it back. Did she? No. She said, oh, honey, I've been using this for so many years. What difference does it make now? Right? So we all have a choice. We can decide to take our chances or clean up our act, right? And I think one thing that I know I learned when I went through cancer, I went to Swedish at the time, and my oncologist gave me a list of things to avoid, which is probably where I got this idea. But it was most of it was food. And to this day, I don't eat any of the things that were on that list. Because in my opinion, and I only can speak for myself, after having a cancer diagnosis, I don't ever want to go there again. So if I can have some information and some knowledge to keep me from having to go through that again, I'm going to do it, okay? So that's kind of the reason why we have this list. The good news is there's lots of good ingredients. So here's a list of calming, soothing, and anti-inflammatory ingredients. Every one of these are going to support the body, support the skin, and not have any harmful side effects. And yes, please feel free to take pictures of the screen. I'm going to turn it. Not yet? Okay, almost. And these are things you've probably heard of, and guess what? You can pronounce them, right? Here are some more, and you'll see some of these are on two different lists. Here are hydrating and moisturizing ingredients, and then barrier protecting ingredients. A lot of talk right now about SPFs and the ingredients in SPFs, and there's been this big controversy of, do we wear it, do we not wear it, what do we do? Well, yes you can, but you're going to want to make sure that whatever SPF that you're choosing has zinc in it, not any of the chemical sunscreens, because a lot of them do have links to cancer. And I remember many years ago my mother-in-law told me that she would never wear SPF because it causes cancer. And I went, what? Like, where is she getting that? She was a pharmacist, so she knew ingredients and she knew things way before the rest of us did. So your chemical sunscreens, please avoid them as much as possible. Say that again? You want zinc oxide. You want zinc. Zinc is more of a physical barrier, and it is actually calming and soothing and protecting, and it doesn't have any links to anything that's harmful. Wound healing ingredients. So all of us get boo-boos, and the older we get, the longer they take to heal, right? So if we can give them a little boost, a little push. My favorite is number one on the list. It's called tamanu oil. Tamanu oil has been used for literally thousands of years, not in our country, but in other countries, for wound healing, for hydration. It actually has the ability to turn over skin cell turnover, increase it by 36%. And it's an oil. Now it is from a pit of a fruit, and so that is technically considered a nut, but I've been using it for 16 years with my cancer patients, and I have not to date had anybody have a reaction to it, even if they had a nut allergy. It's more of a pit. Okay, ready? Well, you can contact me because you want it pure, and then I can tell you how to do that. And I think my information is on here. My website is, and you can contact me from the website. Okay? So now let's look at during versus after, and what's the difference, and why do we need to do it a little bit different. So during cancer treatment, we want to limit sun exposure, especially if you're on any medication that causes photosensitivity. And about 90% of chemotherapies cause photosensitivity, which means you're going to burn a whole lot easier. And hopefully you didn't have to find that out the hard way. So we want to avoid smoking if we can, just because that affects the blood pressure and flow, and healing is slowed down a little bit with that. Have a consistent daily skincare routine. Will you raise your hand if you take care of your skin every day? Good job. Lots of you. Okay, good. Avoid any harsh or heavily fragranced products when you're going through chemotherapy. And then work with your dietitian as well at the Cancer Center to find skin-friendly, nutritious foods, because there are a lot of skin-friendly foods that will actually support and strengthen your barrier. For example, salmon, avocado, right? Some of your green leafies and berries are really, really good for the skin. And dark chocolate. Simple ways to protect and nurture. You're going to want to manage stress. because stress affects our skin. Have you ever had like a really bad day and then a really bad night? You didn't sleep because of it? You get up the next day and someone says to you, wow, you look tired. Like, what's going on? Nobody wants to hear that, right? We know we had a bad night. Staying hydrated. So water is really important, and you already know that, but we should be drinking at least 8 ounces of water a day if we want to have nice, beautiful skin. And get good sleep. Whatever you can to get good sleep, because that's when your skin repairs. That's when our body repairs. And so sleep is important. Make it a point to get some good rest. And if you can't sleep at night, some people can't sleep at night, and they don't or won't take a nap if you can. Take a nap. My husband watches that Reacher show, and Reacher says, sleep when you can, right? So grab it when you can. If you got 15, 20 minutes, you can have a power nap. It'll work wonders for you. Always keeping your hands clean, and try not to touch your face. Okay? And when we have something going on, we feel like touching it all the time, and that's just going to make it worse. Okay? So try to keep your hands clean and don't touch. So the goal during chemotherapy is to keep the skin clean, dry, and cool. Be extra gentle. Apply a soothing moisturizer twice a day. We do not recommend waxing or shaving, because your skin during chemotherapy has thinned a bit. It's a little bit more fragile, so it will tear or lift with waxing, and you'll not want that, because we want to protect that, keep all bacteria and infections away from us. When our immune system's down, we want to protect our skin. And then protect from UV. Again, check with your doctor and your medication, but most of them are going to cause some photosensitivity. Anybody deal with this condition called hand-foot syndrome? So this is a condition that happens with chemo, that the chemo pools in your eccrine or sweat glands, so it happens on the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet. And with friction or heat, it can create this problem. It brings the chemo up into the epithelial tissues and causes this painful, peeling, dry skin type condition. So just be aware that there are products available for that, and you want to avoid soaking in water, and always wear gloves when you're gardening. And I used to tell my ladies at the cancer center, go home and tell your husband that Becky says he has to do the dishes now because you aren't supposed to. And you actually could, but we would want you to wear gloves. But it's much better if you can get your hubby to do it. Cool compresses are always nice. It'll take the heat out and just help it feel better. So things we would want to avoid are hot water. So that means no hot baths, no hot showers, warm water, because hot dries. And remember, dry skin is the #1 side effect of the chemotherapy for most people. Avoid any rough textures, so no loofah. Harsh soaps or exfoliants, or even essential oils. So we don't recommend putting an essential oil directly on the skin. Does anybody know why you shouldn't put it directly on your skin? What? It does. It's transdermal. It actually can go right into the bloodstream. So if you put an essential oil on and it goes into your bloodstream, and it might or might not be something that's good for you, it might be one that maybe you're allergic to and you didn't even know it. So it's a little too risky. We never put them directly on. If you ever do it, you're gonna have it in carriers, so with other ingredients that will keep it on the surface, and you can still have your smell if that's what you're looking for, but never put an essential oil directly on your skin. Manicures, pedicures, or spa treatments, if you have them during chemotherapy, try to see if you can find someone who's oncology trained and understands what you should and shouldn't do. As an example, for manicures and pedicures, we do not cut cuticles. Even filing can be a little dangerous because we don't want to break the barrier, and you don't soak in water. Okay, so we're going to adjust our manis and pedis during chemo just a little bit. We can still have nail polish, and we can still, have pretty nails, but we don't want to do anything that's going to be potentially dangerous. Hydration, like I said, plenty of water. Keep your nails short and smooth. This says avoid polish and acetone during active symptoms. But I always say check with your doctor, and they will usually tell you yes or no, whether you can have your manicure or not. You probably want to elevate your feet because we're helping lymphatic flow and blood flow when we're going through chemotherapy. And of course, call your care team if you notice any blistering, open sores, or any pain that worsens. So as a gentle reminder, your skin is working really hard right now. So treat it gently and consistently and protect it as much as you can, because you're not only going to support your skin, but you're also going to support your health. Anybody in the room have immunotherapy? So some of you, yes. So again, gently cleanse twice a day. Choose fragrance-free and harsh chemical-free cleanser. Always use warm, not hot. Apply any serums that can calm and protect the skin. A really good one is HA or hyaluronic acid, but just make sure you check the ingredient deck to make sure there's not any other junk in there that's on this list, but you want an HA because that is known for wound care and also hydration. And shield your skin from UV. Radiation therapy. We're going to, again, cleanse the area and keep it free of all products at least 4 hours prior to radiation therapy. So if you're having your radiation treatment in the morning, you'll want to, right afterwards, apply calendula oil, because that's the one known to help support skin in radiation. And then you can put it on again at night before you go to bed. Keep that area cool and dry and protect it from sun because it's already radiation exposed, so it's going to burn real easy if it gets seen by the sun. Surgery is another one that most of us have, even if it's just maybe a biopsy, or maybe it's when you got your port put in, so we've got an incision there. So we're always going to follow medical instructions first and keep that area clean and dry, avoid all the harsh products, moisturize carefully. With wound care, we never put anything on or in open wounds, so you got to wait till that incision closes, and then you can start using the tamanu oil would be what I would recommend for that. And that's what will support scar healing. So don't tug on that area and keep it hydrated, moisturized, and have a good tamanu oil on it. So emotional self-care matters too. So healing isn't just physical, right? Surgical sites can bring up emotions, especially if it represents your illness, loss, or change. So take your time and speak to yourself with kindness. Allow your skin and your spirit to heal at their own pace. I've met many client who was proud of their scars because it meant something to them. That was their strength. They made it through this, right? But I've also met equally as many who were the opposite. I'm not going to say repulsed, but they didn't want anyone to see them. They didn't want to look at them, right? Because it was a constant reminder of what they went through. And Marika, when she talked this morning, it's about a thought change, right? So think about it different. Look at that scar and you have a choice. It can either remind you of something icky and awful that you went through, or it can tell you how strong you are. You are here, right? So after you're all done with your cancer treatments, okay, first thing I want you to do is celebrate. Do a little happy dance, okay? And then when you do start any aggressive skin treatments, you're going to go slow because your skin is now different. Has anybody ever heard that your skin basically renews itself every 7 years? Okay, well, you just upped that by going through chemo. So now you got all new skin. You need at least 6 months of cell turnover rate to where you can start doing any of those things. So if you were one of those that went to the spa before and you had peels or laser or microderm or any of those things, you want to wait until you're 6 months past your last chemo, okay? And then go slow. I always recommend a little patch test. Let's see how you do, because you got new skin. You're all new. You got a new attitude, you probably got new hair, and you got to remind yourself you got new skin too, okay? So be gentle with it. And if you go too soon, we can have some issues. That top picture is somebody who got waxed too soon, and that's called skin lifting. Never a fun thing. Yes, we want the hair gone, but we want to keep the skin, right? Remember, you're healing from the inside out. And I always say, let your skincare routine be more than just a task. Make it a ritual. Make it something that you do every day at a certain time just for you. Go into the bathroom, close the door, tell the kids and the hubby to leave you alone for 20 or 30 minutes, right? You might have to tell the dog the same thing. Mine always thinks she needs to come in with me. And then turn on some fun music or something that means something to you and create a ritual of really caring for yourself, okay? And remember, this isn't about vanity. This is about health, because the healthier your skin is, the healthier you will be. Your story tells a story of strength, survival, and healing. So love it. You know, a lot of times when we're going through the cancer journey, we're a little bit mad at our body. It let us down, or it did something different than I thought it was going to do, right? But change that thought process and love it and say, I love my skin. I love the skin I'm in. Okay? I'm going to be 65. Oh, I am 65. I'm going to be 66 this year. I always forget. It's okay, right? I'm not 20 anymore. I do not have to look 20. I have wrinkles, but the way I look at them is this. I am here, and every one of those wrinkles has a meaning to me. It meant I got to smile on the happy times, cried at the sad times, right? And we all have those. Embrace them. It's who we are, and it's who I am today because of all of that. So be gentle with your skin, be proud of it. Take things at your own pace. Reach out for help if you need it, because sometimes, you need a little bit of help with it. It's not following directions. And never forget, you are beautiful exactly how you are. So does anybody have any questions? Oh, we got questions back here.
I haven't heard anything about how to take care of this crazy skin of mine, and thank you. I mean, you're the angel of the day.
Thank you.
Not to discount the others, but it's just, it's something we haven't talked about.
Right.
My questions were related to the essential oils and the other oils that you mentioned, because to me, there seemed to be a conflict because some of them were the same, and on one slide you had they were good, and on the other one you didn't. Could you distinguish between the two and how to work that?
So essential oils, a little bit more clarification on essential oils. Essential oils are medicinal. I'm sure you guys have heard that, right? And in other countries, they use it in homeopathic care, right? And in our country, we went a little crazy and gave them to everybody. And so there were a lot of problems that were caused and can be caused if we don't use them correctly. So if you're going to use essential oils, find somebody that is really trained in it, and I'm talking about a homeopathic doctor here in the U.S., and you can find them, okay? And then you can use them. Essential oils in products can be good because they're at the bottom of the ingredient deck. Do you guys know ingredient decks? What's at the top is the most percentage that's in that product, and then it will go all the way down to the bottom, and an essential oil should be at the bottom, which means it is less than 1% of that ingredient deck, okay? And in that sense, it will be safe. And when we formulated a product line specifically to work with what we call medically reactive skin conditions, we did put some essential oils in there because they are anti-inflammatory, antibacterial, antifungal, right? So each one of them that was chosen to be in there was in there for a purpose. So just keep in mind at the bottom. The lists that had things that were duplicates, it's because some ingredients actually multitask. So they were all on the good ingredient list, and they do more than one thing. So they might have been anti-inflammatory, but they were also calming and moisturizing. That answer your question? Okay, you're welcome.
Just a second. Oh, you're done now. Could you hear her?
No, go ahead and let her do that.
Oh, I say,
Good or bad? Is that what you're
yeah,
asking me?
SSP, you say no to use it, but then one of your slides said to use it, so.
Okay, so for clarification, I said don't use one with chemical SPFs.
Oh, okay.
And that would be like oxybenzone, octosylate, those type of things. And you can find it when you look at an SPF, it'll have active ingredients, the drugs are listed at the top. And it will either be, or something that's considered a drug or pharmaceutical, it'll say oxybenzone and some other chemicals, or it will say zinc oxide. And we recommend using a zinc oxide-based SPF. Okay?
So how do you know which one is the chemical then, the one that's a pharmaceutical?
I can't hear that question. Say that again.
How do you know which one is the chemical one? Is it,
It'll be listed at the top,
okay,
and it'll say a percentage. So it'll say the active ingredient.
okay,
And that's where it will show right at the top, the ingredient deck on the back.
okay, thank you.
Okay? Yep.
My question is, what can you use for the scarring that sometimes is on your face or arms? From that, is there anything you can use to remove that?
Yes, so what can you use for scarring? What we recommend is that tamani oil. And there's a process, twofold, two of them. One is called feathering, and that you put that tamani oil on your little ring finger and you feather opposite direction of your incision. So if your incision's horizontal, you're going to feather back and forth vertically, and that helps that skin come together, lay flatter, right? If it's an old scar, then you're going to want to do some scar support, which is basically breaking up that. So you're going to take that scar in your hand and just kind of crunch, 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 break that up. Do that every day, and then put the tamani oil on it. Yep, you're welcome. Coconut oil is great. Yep, but so it's great, but it's not complete. I would still add some other things in with that, but it's not harmful at all. Yep, coconut oil is good. Anybody else have a question? Witch hazel, antibacterial, antifungal, but drying. So be careful with it. Witch hazel. Okay.
Okay, I have a question about your slides. They're so wonderful. Are they online where we can see them, or can we get a packet of them? Or, I couldn't get pictures of everything.
Yeah, so I'm happy to share them. If you would like to email me, you can come up afterwards and grab one of my cards, and that has my email address on there. And you can email me and ask for them, and I'll send you this slide presentation in the slide form.
And one more, do you have an opinion about macadamia nut oil?
So again, I like the nut oils. They can be great. However, too many people have allergies to them. So we chose not to put any nut oils in our products. So if you are okay with it and you have a product with macadamia nut that you love, great. Nothing bad in it, except allergy causing. Yes. Hold on just one second. And that's a good question.
My doctor prescribed tea tree oil for my nails. My current chemo cocktail is kind of breaking them, and then they just kind of peel and peel and peel.
Yep.
And it seems to be working. Is there any problems with tea tree oil?
No. Tea tree oil is, again, antibacterial, antifungal, great when you're going through chemo and having nail issues.
Thank you.
Right in the front here, somebody asked about mineral oil. What's the problem with mineral oil? It's a petrochemical byproduct, and with continuous use, and this is really interesting because it's in a lot of over-the-counter skin products, with continuous use, it actually breaks down the barrier. So if you've been using a product like that for a very long time, you will feel like you can't use anything else because now whatever you put on your skin stings because you've broken down your barrier. So you got to break it loose, let it go, and start slow with something good. But mineral oil is a no-no. It's on here. Pretty sure it is. Yep, it is. Okay, what other questions? Anybody? Oh, in the back here.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. The chemotherapy can cause like a long-term, this crepe-like paper skin on the forearms especially. Do you have any recommendations for that?
Okay, so chemo causing crepey, thin skin. So it is something that actually can change when you start protecting the barrier and allowing the skin to rebuild. So do something with protecting the barrier. So that means finding the right product to put on after you shower. One of my favorites, and you're going to go when I tell you this, but I love castor oil. So come out of the shower, dry your skin, pat it dry, and put castor oil on. But again, castor oil has to be cold pressed, organic, and hexane free. But that is a awesome skin protector, and it won't take long, a couple of months, and you'll start to see your skin doing better because when it's protected on the surface, it can do its thing underneath. And then do internal, because it's always inside and outside. Eat some of those good foods. Get some salmon, get some berries, and get some things that are avocado, good for building and strengthening the skin. I can't hear her, sorry. Hexane free, Hexane, hexane free. Yes, we got a question back there?
Yeah, I needed suggestions on shampoo, conditioner for myself, and then I have 2 daughters.
Okay.
I have no idea, like, where to even begin to look or if there are certain brand names.
So again, there's a million to choose from. How do you know? One of the things that I do, I am a nerd, and you can ask my husband when it comes to ingredients, and if he sends me, he won't send me to the drugstore to pick up anything because it'll take me an hour because I got to look at everything first before I can find anything. So I've done a lot of research as a cosmetologist about what kind of things that we need. One of the best, and it's not my brand, but I recommend it, is called Routine. And what we've noticed with Routine is that it cleanses the scalp and the follicles so that the hair can grow, and it also strengthens the hair. You'll see a lot less hair fall out with it.
All right, Rebecca Keene, everybody. Round of applause. Thank you so much. A wealth of information. So website is on here somewhere?
Yes.
On this card?
On the back of
Yeah, website is on the back, www.oncologyspa-solutions.com. Definitely go there to get more information. She did say that she has cards available with her email address on them if you want to reach out to her to see if she'll send you, share the slides with you.
And you can always email me anytime, so it's Becky@oncologyspa-solutions.com. So you can ask questions like what shampoo, what toothpaste, what this, what that, because I've done the research on all of that as well. So feel free to reach out to me with any questions that you have, okay? Thank you so much, you guys, and I wish you all the best.
All right, guys, we're about to go to lunch, which is what a lot of us are here for. And so everybody should have gotten a ticket, a pink or a green ticket. If you did not get that ticket to get your lunch today, make sure you go visit the registration desk and let them know that you need that ticket for lunch. Another reminder, there's 2 places to meet with our exhibitors, the people that sponsored this event and allow us to do it, over off of the courtyard over here and then down the hall over there. One other thing I want you guys to take a look at while you're on lunch is there's 10 baskets that we're going to be doing a drawing for at the end of the day. And so make sure that you look at those baskets, know what you want. We're going to do that drawing pretty quick, and you have 10 seconds to come up and pick the basket that you want if your name gets drawn. So make sure you take a look at those. And our next speaker is going to start at 1 o'clock, so make sure you're back here by 1 o'clock. You'll hear those bells 5 minutes before it's time for you to be back at your seats. So thank you all very much.
Let me just, I'm going to...
She said that she had a sec. Buddy, so full stomachs, got to dig deep, find some energy here. All right, so we've got our next speaker coming up, and after our next speaker, we get to do the fun gift drawing there. So our last speaker is going to be Dr. Frank Senecal. He is a hematologist and oncologist with a clinical focus in breast cancer and general oncology. He is the founder of South Sound Care Foundation, a foundation that strives to bring groundbreaking clinical trials and cancer research to the South Sound region, and to provide residents with cancer treatment options that are available, or that are unavailable. Yes. So provide residents with cancer treatment options that are unavailable. All right, can we put our hands together for Dr. Frank Senecal?
Hi, well, it's great to be here. This is always a great day, isn't it? I know I've always enjoyed it, and I bet you guys have too. I've been in practice between being at the university and being here for about 43 years. And I just retired. But, so I'm not really seeing patients on a routine basis, but still involved in research work and such. I'm not so sure that my talk is going to be all about survivorship, really, and I apologize for that. To some degree it will be, but I'm really going to give you some background in regard to my experience in the past 40 years, what I've seen, kind of the advancements that we've seen. And I also want to talk a little bit about some really crucial things, like the incidence of certain cancers now, the possibilities of preventing cancer. Prevention is crucial, and we can do it. We can do it, we just have to set our minds to it. I'm going to talk a little bit about screening, because we always need to talk about screening. Identifying cancer early is so important. It's a game changer. A small cancer is curable. A big cancer may not be. Then I'll talk a little bit about advances that have occurred in regard to surgery, but also in my field, which is medical oncology and such. So try not to bore you, and we'll move forward here. I want to give a big plug for clinical research. Clinical research does not mean that you're a guinea pig. It does not mean you get the placebo. Clinical research is the way we advance cures for cancer. There's no other way. It's what we have to do to cure more cancers. And many of you have participated in clinical trials, and I applaud that. It's not only for your best interest and your best interest, but it's altruistic. It's going to help our sons and daughters and our grandchildren. Clinical research is key, and that's what our foundation is about, bringing clinical research here to the community. Best options for patients if they need it, options for treatment that they otherwise might not have available. So let's look a little bit at the trends of cancer in the United States now. This is all from the National Cancer Institute, data that they collect from most of the hospitals and states in the United States. You can see that there are some cancers in the red there that are actually increasing in their rates, and that's a little bit disturbing, don't you think? Yeah, I mean, we keep on hearing how well we're doing in regard to cancer. Well, I'm here to tell you, don't put your guard down. Prostate cancer in men, pancreas cancer is increasing. Kidney cancer, myeloma, which is a bone marrow cancer, is increasing. Testicular cancer, gastric cancer, and melanoma of the skin. So we'll talk about those a bit. And in regard to female breast cancer, or female cancers, breast cancer is on the rise. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Cancer of the uterus is on the rise. Why should that be? You can look, cancer of the colon is on the rise. All kind of disturbing. Now, the incidence of cancer overall has decreased to some degree, because of a reduction in cigarette smoking in the United States. And this is an article that came from the National Cancer Institute and the CDC, also disturbing, because the rises that we're seeing in certain cancers are in a younger population, in those young men and young women in their 30s and 40s. Why should that be? We don't know. So this is another way of looking at trends in regard to incident rates. Those first two lines, the red one and the blue one on top, are trends in terms of incidence of cancer, not deaths, but incidence of cancer. And you can see in men who are in the red that the incidence is dropping. And that's principally because of cigarette smoking dropping. Now about 20% of our population smokes, and it's gradually going down, thank God. A small increase in rate with women. And that's principally due to breast cancer rates going up, colon cancer rates going up, and cancer of the uterus going up. The lower two lines there are death rates. In other words, what's the frequency of death due to cancer? Is it going up or going down? Overall, you can tell it's going down among men and also going down among women, about 1 to 1.5% per year over my career, 40 years. So that's pretty impressive when you look at it in the long term, but when you think of all the effort that's being put into cancer care, 1% a year reduction in death rate, is that enough? To my mind, it's not. And these are, again, just a different way of illustrating cancer death rates in the United States. But again, I just want to emphasize some peculiar cancers are rising in terms of death rates. Melanoma and non-melanoma of the skin. Oral cavity and pharyngeal cancer. In spite of smoking going down, why would oral cancer go up? Cancer of the bones like myeloma we mentioned, cancer of the pancreas, cancer of the breast, cancer of the uterus, etc. Well, with that background, let's talk about prevention. And you know what? We're our own worst enemies. We are. We are our own worst enemies. We know what the hell to do, and many of us just don't do it. Right? Many of us don't. You can do it. You can do it. You can eat nourishingly and avoid fast foods. Avoid things with a lot of processed chemicals in them. You can exercise. We really don't know what it is about exercise. Sure, maybe a little bit of weight loss associated with exercise. You feel better, it gets rid of stress, etc. Keeps you a little bit more mobile, which at my age is really important. But there's something about it that reduces cancer risk. We know that, for example, for colon cancer. Why would exercise reduce death rates due to colon cancer? I don't know, but it does. So exercise, move, walk. You don't have to be Charles Atlas, and lift weights and all of that stuff, but you do need a well-balanced exercise program. Environmental exposures, we'll talk a little bit about that. Smoking, we've already commented on. Alcohol. Alcohol is a big offender. Maybe not in this audience, maybe it is. But drinking for a woman more than one glass of wine or more than one highball a night, the rate of cancer goes up. And with men, it's about 1 to 2. Men can drink a little bit more, they say. But many in the United States drink more than that. They drink a half a bottle of wine. They drink 3/4 of a bottle of wine. They have 2 or 3 highballs. and that increases our rate of cancer. Many different kinds of cancer. Finally, sunlight. Well, what do I mean by sunlight? We love sunlight. We don't get enough sunlight, do we, here in the Northwest? I love it when the sun comes. But we have to protect ourselves. The incidence of melanoma, maybe the most deadly cancer I know, is rising because of its damage to our skin. Melanoma, just a millimeter difference in the depth of a melanoma can result in death. Better not to get it. Wear a hat. Wear a sun guard. Avoid excessive exposure to the sun, and protect our grandchildren and our children. Also, non-melanoma skin cancers, called squamous cancers or basal cell cancers, increased. Finally, radiation exposure. And that's really on us as physicians. We do a lot of CAT scans. We do a lot of x-rays. It's now thought that as many as 5% of cancers in the United States are actually caused by too much radiation that we inflicted on all of you. This is a list of viruses associated with cancer, and the first four are the ones that I really want to speak about. The others are much more common in other parts. Epstein-Barr virus is the virus for mono, but can be associated with certain kinds of lymphomas, for example, certain kinds of neck cancers. To that, okay. Hepatitis B virus and hepatitis C virus associated worldwide with a very large number of cancers, usually hepatocellular cancer, liver cancer, a bad one to get. HIV, that's the AIDS virus. And you know, we can control AIDS now with medication. We can keep it from evolving, causing such immune deficiency that patients are at risk for developing cancer. But still, 1 person out of 5 that has that HIV virus doesn't take medicine, either because they are non-compliant or because they can't afford it, they can't access a doctor, but 1 in 5, which is a travesty. And around the world, it's going to get worse. Finally, human papillomavirus. So this is the virus that causes cervical cancer. Not immediately, but over a long period of time. Many of you ladies have been screened for this when you have your pap smear. It also causes anal cancer. It also causes oropharyngeal cancer. So what can we do? Well, a long list. Many, many cancers are associated with environmental exposure. And this is just a long list of those. I didn't mention on this list the herbicides, for example, Agent Orange. We're still paying the price for Agent Orange used in Vietnam. I still see vets who are exposed and are still suffering from a large list of cancers, and the list goes on and on. Well, let's take a minute and talk about maybe how to reduce risk a little bit. One way of doing that is nutrition. And you know, when I trained back in the 70s or 60s, 70s, and then really went into practice in the mid-80s, we didn't know a lot about nutrition, really. We had a feeling that nutrition must somehow be involved with cancer risk, but didn't really know. And then a number of different studies were done, but you can imagine how difficult it would be. Look at this, only over 250,000 foods, and foods of various combinations that we consume. And then cancers, various cancers that could be studied. Not an easy strategy to gain information about what foods cause cancer, what cancers are caused by foods, etc. So difficult. But now we know a few things for sure. We know colon cancer is related to our diet. Maybe not a big surprise, but now it's proven. And it has to do really with red meats, processed foods, sugary drinks, all associated with colon cancer. Secondly, breast cancer. There have been 3 large trials developed really in the 1980s and then implemented where thousands of women have been followed for breast cancer based upon what their diet is composed of. And it's pretty clear that you need to eat healthy. You need to eat a lot of vegetables, some fruits, for example, grains. Avoid fatty foods, processed foods, fats. Don't gain weight. All of those things are really crucial. Maybe not easy, but it makes a substantial difference in risk. So for breast cancer, eat healthy. My take home on this is something called the Mediterranean diet that many of you have probably heard of. That doesn't mean you have to be vegan and avoid all animal products or vegetarian, although you could. You can eat some meat, small amounts. You can eat fish, grains, vegetables. It's really quite a healthy diet and not hard to comply with. But diet is so important. We are what we eat. Now it's thought that if we could reduce smoking, reduce alcohol intake, eat a better diet, that 35% of the cancers that we just showed on those graphs would disappear. Disappear! And here we're spending billions of dollars on developing new drugs and such to treat advanced cancer. It's really up to us. We can do this. We just have to be more thoughtful about our own health, our kids' health, grandchildren's health. We have an opportunity. Teach our kids how to live. Well, when we talk about prevention, we should also talk about vaccines. You know, a lot of discussion about vaccines. You'll hear it periodically in the news. This vaccine has been developed or that vaccine against cancer. How good are our vaccines against cancer? Can we take a vaccine and just prevent cancer? Well, it depends upon what cancer you're talking about. And if it happens to be hepatitis B virus, and we can uniformly implement hepatitis B vaccines throughout the world, we would reduce the incidence of hepatocellular cancer or liver cancer dramatically. And that's almost 1 million deaths per year. HPV, that's the papillomavirus. That's the one that causes that oropharyngeal cancer, anal cancer, and the #1 cause of cervical cancer. Now, you've all heard that your kids ought to be getting that HPV vaccine, or your grandchildren, by the age of 9 or 10 or 11. And I know that there's that issue of I can't imagine why Emily would need that HPV vaccine. She's not going to have to worry about those cancers. Well, you don't know that. All we know is that the incidence of cervical cancer, anal genital cancer, and oropharyngeal cancer is going up. And it's due to that virus. And we've got a vaccine that'll stop it, keep it from developing. You've got to be nuts not to do that. Your kids need to get vaccinated for that. Boys and girls. How good are vaccines in stopping cancer from growing? Or once cancer's initiated, how good are vaccines? To be honest, right now they're not very good. We don't have really one vaccine available right now for advanced cancer that is effective or predictably effective. Lots being tested, and there's going to be advances in this. Some advances right up at the University of Washington by Dr. Desis in breast cancer that I'm hopeful are going to be really positive. But we're waiting. We're waiting for some positive results. So let's talk about screening for a minute. I'll take some of the pressure off for a few minutes on you guys. Well, early detection makes all the difference. These are the recommendations for screening for colon cancer. A completely curable disease as long as it's detected early. And it's one of those cancers that's been identified as occurring in younger age people now. So that the recommendations are that colon cancer screening start at age 45. Not age 50, but age 45. Nothing more tragic than that 45-year-old mom comes in with advanced colon cancer that has been ignored because colon cancer doesn't occur in 45-year-olds. Well, that is not true. We know that it does. So screening has got to start earlier. Colonoscopy is the gold standard for screening. Every 10 years, if no polyps are seen, if polyps are seen, it might be more frequent. Requires that prep. The prep is what turns everybody off. I know. I've had 5 of them. It turns me off too. But, you know, what is it? I mean, it's one night, you know, where you got to fast for a couple of days and then one night of sitting on the toilet, you know, and then you go get it done and you go have a salad. I almost said a hamburger. Flexible sigmoidoscopy. That's a shorter scope than the one you see here. But it also fails to get to half the colon. So you're not getting a complete exam. And therefore it's required that you have your stool tested for blood as well on an annual basis. But the Flex Sig is a good test, but it's certainly not as complete as the colonoscopy. Virtual colonoscopy, that's the CT scan colonoscopy. Kind of sounds good, doesn't it? You know, just lie down and get a CT scan. Well, the prep is the same, I'm afraid to tell you. So you don't get away with anything easily. Doesn't require any sedation. It can miss small polyps, but it's a procedure that is done more commonly, particularly when a patient can't undergo a colonoscopy for medical reasons. Finally, these are the stool-based tests. And when I started my practice back in the 1980s, we were doing just checks for blood in the stool. And it was this old test called the fecal occult blood test. Not very accurate, lots of false positives, not a great test. It was the best we had. Since that time, an immunological test has been developed called the FIT test, which is much more accurate for detecting blood. And then the state-of-the-art test now for checking the stool is a DNA test called the Cologuard test. And you'll see that on television advertised. It was developed by a couple of GI docs from the Mayo Clinic. It looks at particular genetic changes in the stool that are indicative of cancer developing. It's a pretty good test. Has to be done every 3 years. So colon cancer screening, no question. You can do this. You can choose the technique you want. Talk to your doctor, but get it done. I'm now going to talk about lung cancer screening. And this is the new screening that has been developed over the past 10 years or so. This is for individuals that have been smokers in the past, age 50 up to age 80, with 20-pack year history. That means smoked a pack of cigarettes a day for 20 years or more, or within a 15-year period of having quit. Insurance should pay for this. This is FDA approved. The U.S. Preventative Task Force has strongly indicated that this should be done. It reduces the death rate of lung cancer dramatically, probably as high as 38-40%. Early detection for colon cancer matters, and for lung cancer. And this is what we're trying to prevent from growing. That little nodule you see in the left upper lobe there, the one that's circled. At that stage, that cancer is curable. But as soon as it starts moving into the lymph nodes in the center of the chest or to other tissues, the chances of cure drop off dramatically. So for those of you who have been smokers or currently are smokers, or those of you who know smokers or are in love with a smoker, talk to them about this. Right now, about 20% of the patients who are eligible for lung cancer screening actually get screening. 20%. So let's go on a little bit further and talk about breast cancer for a second. When I came into practice, there was no such thing as genetic testing for breast cancer. It really didn't exist. It developed when Mary Claire King, who's now at the Hutch, identified the BRCA mutation in 1994, I believe it was. This is a gene that's passed on from generation to generation that predisposes to breast cancer. And it kind of makes sense because the job of this gene is to repair DNA. It's a little carpenter gene. It just senses when DNA has been damaged in tissue, and it repairs it. Well, what happens when the carpenter gene doesn't work? In other words, is mutated? For no good reason for the individual, for the lady who has it, but the gene doesn't work. Then the risk of certain cancers goes up, particularly breast cancer, but also ovarian cancer and multiple others. For example, in males, prostate cancer. So this was dramatic, identifying this alteration. And since that time, 20 other genes have been identified that will predispose to cancers, many of them breast cancer, ovarian cancer, but several others as well. So identifying a hereditary cause for cancer is crucial, and if one has a strong family history of breast cancer, you ought to get that history, and you ought to discuss it with your primary care doctor. Is there any chance that in my family that I carry a genetic mutation? Unfortunately, my second brother is probably going to pass away in the next few weeks due to prostate cancer, and I have an uncle who passed away due to that. So my next trip into the urologist will be discussing with him getting me tested genetically for a gene that may predispose to prostate cancer. Think about it. What's your family history? Can you accurately define that family history? And then if it looks like there could be a predisposition, discuss it with your family doctor. So breast cancer screening involves mammography, and all of you are aware of that. And it's a very effective tool. And thank God we have the Milgard Center, right, to do our breast cancer screening. And they do a great job. And others in the community do as well. I know Kaiser does a good job, for example, etc. So women, the recommendations have changed. Women at age 40, it's recommended that they be considered for breast cancer screening with mammography. Now at that age, the breast can be somewhat dense, and the value of the mammogram is a little bit less. The denser it is, the harder it is to see anything that's abnormal. As time goes on, the breast typically becomes less dense. And these are the recommendations. Mammography saves lives. This is a depiction of a normal mammogram, and this is not a normal mammogram. You can see that shadow there, the spiculations that you see extending off of this. all strongly suggestive of this being a cancer. In fact, it was a cancer. Now, how about this one? What do you think of that? Well, that's a pretty dense breast. And so a mammography in that case is not going to be very helpful. You can miss things on mammography, even three-dimensional mammography, which is what's used here in Tacoma. So what do we do about that? Well, it's important. That's right. It's important for the physician to notice that, talk to the patient, and give consideration to MRI. MRI is a different technique. It's expensive. That's why it's not done routinely. But with high breast density, it can be very valuable in identifying a lesion that otherwise you would not see. So this gives you an idea that the patient in the right breast has this big density there that otherwise would have been missed. So MRI is used frequently when we're suspicious or when we just can't trust mammography to be accurate. So breast density reporting requirements. Now, in your report that you receive, that letter that you receive, or when you talk to the radiologist, they have to identify how dense your breasts are and report that to you so that you can discuss that with your doctor. One other thing I want to just briefly mention in regard to mammography is the issue of artificial intelligence. And this is a technique that's going to allow us to identify breast cancer earlier in mammography. The reason being it's possible to look at thousands and thousands of mammograms and relate that to a patient's history, to whether they develop early breast cancer. And certain patterns that are seen on the mammogram will predict that several years earlier than when they become actually visible. So artificial intelligence, the ability to learn from a machine about certain characteristic patterns on the mammogram are going to allow us to predict the development of cancer at an earlier stage. The last thing about screening I wanted to mention is, you know, we could just resolve all of this if we could just, for God's sakes, do a blood test and it would detect all the cancer. Wouldn't that be nice? Well, we're getting to that point. That's going to happen. There are a number of molecular tests that are being studied right now that look at certain alterations of genetic material in our blood, little fragments of DNA, that can, with a certain degree of accuracy, identify early cancer. Now, we're not quite to the point where it's ready for prime time, but we're getting close. And in the next several years, I would not be surprised if it's available. So be watching for that. The test won't be perfect, but it won't be accepted by the FDA unless it's pretty good. I'm going to talk about a few things from my career that I've seen happen as time has gone by, advances that I've seen, for example, in surgery. Some big advances in breast surgery where less is actually more. Doing less is actually better, particularly in regard to surgery, the sentinel node procedure. Some of you may have had that, and that technique is really valuable. And then we'll also talk about other forms of cancer and surgical techniques. This is an example of a lady's axilla and breast, and you can see those green nodal sites there are depictions of lymph nodes. In the past, when I started my practice, every patient with advanced breast cancer, it was recommended that they have an axillary node dissection. So removal of all those nodes. And the result of that, of course, was morbidity. swelling, pain, discomfort, chronically, swollen arms. And, thank goodness for our lymphedema care that controlled a great deal of that, but still, ladies were left with that disability. The sentinel node procedure is a procedure where the key lymph node can be identified by an injection of either a radioisotope or dye or both that identifies the single node or 2 or 3 nodes that need to be removed by the surgeon so that a complete axillary node dissection is unnecessary. Really a significant advance. This is a depiction of an actual photograph I took of robotic surgery. This is a technique that's being developed for gynecological cancers, GI cancers, and lung cancer. This is a surgeon sitting at a console, separate from the patient, manipulating with his 2 fingers arms of this thing, the robot. The robot has the ability to visualize inside the abdomen, cameras, high-resolution cameras that are much better than our own eye. Very fine, minute instruments that allow for the surgeon to dissect out areas where there might be cancer, so that the ability of the surgeon in this case, by making 4, 5, or 6 small incisions to insert those arms of the robot and then resect the cancer without doing a major surgical incision, with a high degree of accuracy and far less morbidity to the patient. In thoracic surgery, 6 small lesions or incisions are made. They insert the camera, they insert the dissecting equipment, and are able to remove an entire lung if necessary, with very great accuracy, very less pain to the patient, a lot less morbidity. Out of the hospital in 24 hours rather than 7 days. So these are some of the advances that we see with that kind of minimally invasive surgery. So if it's possible to have minimally invasive surgery, whether it's the robot or another technique, there are several techniques, then it certainly is worth pursuing that. And I'm going to close just by talking a little bit about advances in my area, medical oncology, that I've seen. I grew up really in the 1980s principally having one tool, which was chemotherapy. Initially maybe 20 drugs that we could use, subsequently 30, subsequently 100, then 120. But all of them are basically designed, the majority of them were designed to affect the DNA of the cancer. And of course, they affected our normal cells. So I was in a position of poisoning the patient in order to try to overcome the cancer. And just a very tough situation. Now, chemotherapy can be extremely effective for certain cancers, and it's still on our menu. I don't mean to say that it's not. And it's curative in certain kinds of cancers, very, very effective. But thank God we've progressed a little bit beyond that. So let's just talk about that for a minute. Maybe the biggest breakthrough in the past 10 years has been immune therapy, understanding the immune system, and then how to manipulate it for the benefit of the patient, to have the immune system actually treat the cancer. When you think about it, why isn't our immune system fighting the cancer? You've got a cancer in your abdomen. What's up? Why doesn't your immune system get rid of it? It's not as simple as you ate a hot dog yesterday and that interfered with it. Maybe the hot dog caused the cancer originally, but why can't we get rid of that cancer with our own immune system? Now with immunotherapy, some amazing things have occurred. This is one example. It's just from the New England Journal of Medicine just this last year. But certain kinds of cancers that could be treated with immunotherapy and surgery wasn't even necessary. The cancers just disappear. This is one example of immune therapy, and I'll try to take you through this quickly. Turns out that cancers produce stuff to inhibit our immune system. They block our immune system from recognizing that it's foreign, that it shouldn't be there. One of the mechanisms involves this PD-L1, PD-1 relationship. It turns out that PD-L1 is kind of a blocker to our immune system. It's possible for it to attach to the T cell through this receptor. We call it the PD-1 receptor. And it turns off our T cells so that the normal activating process, which is right here, is paralyzed. It suppresses the immune system. Very commonly seen. Lung cancer, for example, melanoma, for example, breast cancers of some forms, some of the hematological malignancies. Only recently, as I said in the past 10 years, has this issue been identified. And then, thanks to work done at Dana-Farber and then at other cancer institutions in the Hutch, we've developed tools to block the blocker, to block the inhibition. In other words, a tool that is anti-PD-1 that blocks this receptor on our T cells so it can't get inhibited. Or to block this PD-L1, which is the mechanism that the cancer cell is using to inactivate the T cell. The result of that is a more active immune system, a more active T cell that gets revved up and can attack the cancer. And this is just not pie-in-the-sky stuff now. This is used in the clinic very frequently, responsible for now changing the paradigm in lung cancer with advanced lung cancer, cancers that are stage 2, stage 3, patients now being cured when before the potential for cure was very, very small. Same thing is true with melanoma. Melanoma, as I mentioned to you, that skin cancer where a millimeter of difference makes the difference between life and death. Now, with this form of therapy, we have patients who have had advanced melanoma involving their liver, their bones, etc. And almost half of those patients at 5 years have no active disease. A miracle. Really a miracle. So this is only going to get better, our understanding of the immune system and how to activate it in order to help our patients without using chemotherapy. This is another technique. This is called CAR T cell therapy. There was a little girl in 2012 at the University of Pennsylvania. And she had acute lymphoblastic leukemia, the most common kind of leukemia that kids get. But she was dying. She was at the doorstep of death. And they had developed through testing, a procedure called CAR T cell therapy. And that procedure means that T cells are taken out of the patient. It's possible to do that by just withdrawing blood, putting it in a special machine that pheresis off or takes off those lymphocytes. And then the blood is given back to the patient, but the lymphocytes then are taken and manufactured into killer T cells. What happens is that it's possible through an inactivated virus for the DNA of the T cell to be altered so that it exhibits a killer protein on its surface that is activated against a certain protein on the cancer cell. Those T cells are grown up, millions and millions of them, and then infused back into the patient. And those cells attack that certain target on the surface of the leukemia cell. And that little girl is still doing well in remission. A miracle, another miracle due to immunology. Well, CAR T-cell therapy now is being used in a number of different diseases. In multiple myeloma, which is that bone marrow cancer that we talked about. It's being used more and more in forms of leukemia and in lymphomas. In the future, it will be used in what we call solid tumors. So that means breast cancer, various forms of solid cancer, cancer. This looks a little complicated. But this is to give you an idea, both of these slides, this is gives you an idea of the signaling pathways that cancer cells use. This is particularly lung cancer. All those receptors on the surface of the cell stimulate certain pathways that allow the cancer cell to grow. Our job in oncology is to know those pathways and identify mutations that we can take advantage of at these key sites. Can we block right there and stop the cancer from growing? What if we block here? Can we block that MET receptor and stop the cancer from growing? Can we block this NTRK receptor? Well, the answer to that is yes, we can. We have medications that will block that'll block that signaling, and the patient can go into remission, sometimes be cured. So understanding those very complex pathways, if you think it's complicated, it's complicated. But that's why we have molecular boards. I meet with people around the country every month to talk to them about my patients that have certain molecular changes and how we can best target them. The same thing is true in breast cancer. This is a list of some of those pathways that are so key in breast cancer. So this has kind of been a review of where we are in regard to cancer these days. I know I didn't have a lot to do about discuss in regard to survivorship. I apologize for that, but I just wanted to give you my thoughts about 40 years in oncology. So thank you very much. I think we have time for a few questions.
Dr. Frank Sadikoff, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, your years of experience. I mean, a message of hope there. Like, really, thank you, thank you, thank you. So, closing remarks. So, first of all, thank you everybody for coming, live or at home. A lot of energy in this room. Hopefully, some of y'all at home are sharing that energy, clapping to yourselves.